Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas. We're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Today we're going to talk about the spiritual path, the truth about the spiritual path. But before we get into that, there are just a few little things I wanted to bring up, little tidbits. One of them, there's this woman, she lives somewhere in these mountains, and she's over 100 years old. And they interviewed her, and I've been told this story. They interviewed her and they asked her what her secret to longevity is. And she said there are three things. She said, number one is stay active. And interestingly enough, number two, she said, is volunteer. That's interesting. And then the third one is also kind of interesting. She said, and mind your own business. I thought those were pretty good, huh, Scotty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Three of the toughest things in the world.
Stay active, volunteer, and mind your own business. Yeah. You know, that gets into all the gossipy, rumory, slanderous type stuff that seems a lot of people are so fond of, you know. Another thing too, kind of goes along the same lines as, you know, we're talking about the pandemic and the virus and all that. I think from what I see, we're experiencing right now an excitability pandemic. And it's understandable. I mean, there's so much going on and everything, but people are, you know, excited about and agitated, you know, about the vaccine. They're agitated about the border. They're agitated about politics. They're agitated about, you know, China, and, you know, the list is long, racism, you know. But it just seems everybody's on edge. I'm getting bombarded, by the way, with, you know, emails and texts of people that are just worried, you know, and scared and agitated. And my response to one person was, I said, you know, we're in that phase transition, and the bow, you know, is being pulled back, but it's going to release soon, and we're going to soar. You know, that phase transition is happening, and this is the phase transition, and we've been predicting this for a long time. So that's just, you know, that's just what's going on. So just hang in there, steady hand on the rudder, as I like to say. It's going to make it through here. It's going to require some courage, some commitment, but it's all going to work out, you know. And there was a saint. This was several decades ago, maybe 40, 50 years. And he was saying that karmically, what was going to happen to the world now at our time was going to be an Armageddon. There was going to be, you know, nuclear war or what have you. But that's been circumvented. And so really the little ripples we're experiencing now in the phase transition is great compared to what it could have been. I mean, the idea then was that the slate was going to be wiped clean and everything was going to start all over, you know. So we can count our blessings about that, you know. But those are just a few little tidbits that came to mind. I thought I'd like to share them. But today, Scotty, we're going to talk about the truth about the spiritual path. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. And first on the list, I think, is this idea of, you know, you have the Veda. That's like the physics of existence. If you look at it from the mechanics perspective, there's also the mind, you know, the intellect. There's also, of course, the heart component, the personified correlates of divinity, all like that. But from the perspective of like a more physical idea or the mechanics of creation idea, the Veda is like physics, kind of correlates to physics. Whereas now you have left and right-handed Tantra. Tantra is like technology. Oftentimes people associate Tantra in a kind of a limited way. They think of it as, you know, a negative thing, left-handed, but there's left-handed Tantra and there's right-handed Tantra. right-handed tantra is engineering. It's like if the Veda is like physics, then right-handed tantra is like engineering. It's implementation of the technology of Vedic knowledge. Okay, but then there's also left-handed tantra. Left. What do we got going here? You there, Scotty?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Left-handed tantra is it's kind of like if you blow a fuse in your house and you don't have a fuse to replace it, you just take a little piece of aluminum foil and stick it in there. You can get really flashy, dramatic, and quick results really fast. But the thing is, you can burn the house down. And the reason that's important to understand that is that there are tons of left-handed tantric techniques. And a lot of people use those techniques to, try to evolve spiritually. But it's really unhealthy. It results in a lot of bad karma. And one typical thing that's done is that they use the techniques to kind of like drill open the chakras. And see, the chakras they're subtle, and they are kind of like modulators of the energy system and the energies that enter the body and like that. And they're kind of like filters in a way also. But if you just drill them open, those chakras are delicate. They're supposed to blossom naturally. They're not supposed to detonate. But kind of like the aluminum foil in the fuse box, if you drill out a chakra, all of a sudden, all this light starts pouring in and you're getting all this energy pouring in, and it's quick results. It's left-handed tantra, and it can even feel great. But it's really unhealthy. And it's been said by people that I really trust, saints in India that I know, that it can take 5 lifetimes for that damage to be healed. So we have to be really discerning and careful. I remember there was this one saint in India that said that some people wanted to go visit some Swami or somebody. And he said, if you do that, he said, we will find your body floating down the Ganges. And it took me a while to really get what he's saying. He wasn't necessarily meaning the physical body. He was meaning the spiritual component of a person's being. So bottom line, we really need to be careful to sidestep left-handed tantra. And I'll tell you something. I have said that. I have given lectures about it. I've explained it in detail. But the process, we're talking about evolution. We're talking about human evolution. It's a process. Spiritual growth comes on very gradually. There can be sudden shifts, but it comes along very gradually. And if you go to somebody and they're a great healer and they blow your third eye open and all of a sudden you're seeing all kinds of light and everything, people can be tempted by that sort of a thing. But you really need to be careful. And even people that I've warned and said that to, once that happens, it's almost like a drug. Once you take that drug, you're addicted. So,
Michael, what are some of the things that people are doing, like here, that they got to be careful with, or don't go there kind of.
There are some guru types, self-proclaimed gurus or whatever, that have actual techniques. Like here's an interesting story. There was this guy he got a big, huge following. And this was decades ago. And the way he did it was that when people came to see him, the guru, when people came to see him, they had him walk down this carpet, red carpet, as I recall being told. And at the end of the carpet, sitting on like a throne, was this guru guy. And lined on either side of the carpet were people, but they had energy manipulators planted, along the way. And when these people walked by, they tap their third eye and tap their different chakras. And by the time they got to the end where the little guru guy was, they were seeing lights, and they looked at the guru guy and all sorts of lights were coming out of his head and everything. And they decided the guy was enlightened. And they generally did that with wealthy people, and then they donate all their money. That's one story. But there are other stories. Oftentimes it's done in the name of healing. And what a great healing, boy. I got this healing and now I'm feeling great. I got all this energy moving through me. I'm seeing lights, and people think they're enlightened. But I'd like to say, things like that, you think you're getting enlightened, but what you're doing is you're going insane, So that's another example. I knew this person who was teaching a healing technique where they would take the chakra, pry it open, and then stick little staves in it, like the things you use in collars, to hold the chakra open. Chakras are like flowers, they blossom and then they can close naturally at a particular time. Keeping the chakra pried open all the time is very unnatural, and that's the key to real evolution. It's got to be natural, you see. And I think a lot of times Scotty, people are attracted to flash, they're attracted to drama. And I think there's this idea that if a spiritual guru is different, really weird kind of thing. And like I met this one guy once who was a self-proclaimed guru. And I said, "Hi, how you doing? Where are you from?" And he looked up and he said, "The universe," just like that. And right away I was like, "Oh man." And then I said, "Well, where do you live?" And he said, "Earth." Now, some people think that's great, and wow, this guy's really profound and deep, but it's not how it is. The more you evolve, you don't become more and more weird. You become more and more normal. The whole process of human evolution is the process of normalization. Is that responsive, Scotty? Does that kind of give an idea?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, we have like these idealized notions. What are some idealized notions of enlightenment, Scotty? Well, the whole Jesus thing, as depicted in the Hollywood movies. This guy floats in the room, and like in the movie Ben-Hur, Ben-Hur's there, and the Romans are marching him along, and he's dying of thirst and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden the music gets dramatic, and out from the sunrise or sunset, whatever, emerges this person and gives Ben-Hur some water. And the Roman sergeant with his bullwhip comes up and he's going to chase him away. You're not supposed to give him water. But then he looks at Jesus and he goes like that, and he just backs up. That's not what it's like, it's hard. See, that's the point. There is such a thing as an enlightened being, Jesus, the embodiment of the Christ, but how do you depict that in a movie? Because enlightened people don't come across more weird. If he was really like that, where would they have found three guys that'd be willing to nail him to a cross? It's not like that, and the other thing, Scotty, is like with just personality things, See, our evolution is such an internal thing. It's not a superficial thing. It's deep. It's awakening to the depth of your being. Now we all sense that. We all sense that there's something inside. Some would use the word divinity, some wouldn't. Some would call it the soul. Different people would call it different things. But the idea is that we all sense that. But the thing is, as the physiology refines, as it more and more, I compare it to like a docking station. You know, if you have the mothership, you know, that's kind of like the Veda, or the transcendental level, Chaitanya. You know, and then we're these little satellites that are trying to find their way back to Chaitanya, back to divinity, fully awake, you see, to that divinity within. But you see, when we start to get closer, we feel it, and we feel the pull more and more. All of us feel that pull to some extent. You see, we all do. We sense that divinity within. But what happens is it gets closer and closer to the mother station. At some point, it all of a sudden like clicks. And that's what they call enlightenment. It's almost like you're no longer running on batteries. Now you're plugged into, 110 volts, 220 volts, whatever, you see. But there are two temple areas up in the Himalayas I went to. One of them is called Jageshwara. It's like there are a bunch of temples there, 108 of them, I guess. And each one represents a different kind of awakening. And the point being, there are all sorts of awakenings. And what happens along the spiritual path is people have a certain awakening, kind of like a light bulb goes off, or aha. I mean, we have aha experiences all the time. Those are all just different subsets of different types of awakenings, you know. But oftentimes somebody has an awakening and they decide they're enlightened. But there's only one real full enlightenment, and that's another temple in the Himalayas called Mukteshwara. You know, it's about that. And so that's another place where people get stuck, is they have an awakening, they decide they're enlightened. And then from that unenlightened place, they start mimicking what? Their preconceived notions of what it's supposed to be in their mind like to be enlightened. And that's where you start seeing things, people walking around very serenely and ending every sentence in an upbeat, and all sorts of things. But it's a challenge. The real evolution is a challenge, in that you're sitting there, doing all your spiritual practices and everything. And if they're working or not, particularly if they're not working, then you even feel more inclination to kind of manipulate your personality on the surface. Behavioral modification, something so that you convince yourself that you're evolving. But it's a red herring, it's a distraction. And then there are the people that, because there's kind of a shared group notion of what you're supposed to be like when you're enlightened, and there are people that get so good at that behavioral modification that they convince people who have that shared idealized notion. They convince them that, oh yeah, this guy's enlightened, he's behaving just like an enlightened person should. But it's based on preconceived notions. It's based upon indoctrinations that happen from early on. And if you do that, well, what did Swami Muktananda say? He said, and he was talking about it in that way, but he said, if you spend your life working on self-improvement, all you have to show for it at the end of your life is an improved self. Now, what did he mean by that? He meant conforming your behavioral pattern to some idealized notion. But that's like an overlay. It's like a Band-Aid therapy. It's not real spiritual growth. And that can be tough, because don't we want some kind of sign post along the way that, hey, I'm really evolving and stuff, but it's more internal than that. The rest is a distraction, Now, at the same time, there's such thing as good manners, basic respect, what, Scotty? What else? Just there are certain codes of conduct, things that we can maintain like a decorum. And those are all good. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm just saying that too much of behavioral modification in the name of an idealized notion can lead you astray. It's like echoes of truth, perceived as truth. Hold truth at bay. You might be shooting for enlightenment, but then there's some echo of enlightenment, but it's some preconceived notion, and you go for that. And what does it do? It leads you astray from real evolution. Because if you're hanging on, then you're resisting. And if you're hanging on to that preconceived notion, it can actually preclude the unfoldment of real spiritual evolution, you know.
It's not easy, is it?
What's that?
It's not easy, is it?
It's not easy. Yeah, and that's why I think people can be really tempted, huh, Scotty, for the left-handed tantra thing, or for behavioral modification, or some superficial expression, something, so that they kind of think they're growing. But again, you don't, as you evolve, you don't become more weird, you don't become more otherworldish, you don't become more strange, you become more normal. Now, there's another thing, and that is that with the chakras, you know, this kind of thing where people open to heaven and that, why do they do that? Why do they do that? Well, there's actually a physiological correlate to that, in that the crown chakra, and actually it's a play between the third eye, the front of the sixth chakra, and the crown chakra, that opens to the heavens. And these are mappings now. You see, because we can, that opening above, heaven above, maps onto the transcendent Chaitanya, which permeates everything. But it's a correlation, it's a mapping. And so though there is that reality to it, that can too become a distraction. And we call those people, you know, spirituality current, distortion, really. And they do everything they can, and they're walking around like this, and they're just kind of not even connected to their body anymore. And they think they're spiritually above everybody else. But that's not the way it works. Does that make sense, Scotty? You want to say anything else about that?
Yeah, it's just, you know, like living here in Los Angeles, you see so many different, you know, modalities to go into the spiritual world, you know. It just, I don't know if there's something that you can say in terms of, you know, what should these people be doing? You know, how, you know, because like you said, I mean, it's so easy to, you know, get yourself off in some bad direction. But if you look at it, there's like millions of things that are out there every day that people are messing with and doing and whatever.
See, that's another double bind, isn't it? Because you need to be discerning. But how do you cultivate discernment? I mean, Adi Shankar called the spiritual path the path of discernment. How do you cultivate discernment? Evolve. How do you evolve? Be discerning. So you see what I'm saying there, Scotty?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just have to do your best and really stop and think. And I think this information can help. Number one, most important thing to do to evolve is a proper meditation. But even what I mean by proper, there are all kinds of meditations. There are meditations to pry open your third eye. There are meditations to enable you to focus. There are all kinds of different meditations for all kinds of different things. So what do I mean? And I use the word proper. Maybe I could find a better word, but I'm just using the word proper. Meditation is a meditation that allows the awareness and thereby the whole physiology to rest into its own true nature, which is divine. But it's a natural thing. It's not an imposition. And you can, if you go to my YouTube channel, first two videos that come up are how to meditate. And it's an ancient meditation. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. I didn't make it up. And but it's real because it's natural. It's a natural unfoldment. You just rest into your own true nature. That's what it means. You can't take heaven by storm. You know, you can't attack it. You can't blow open your third eye or have some dramatic. It's a natural unfoldment. And so, first thing I'd say to do is learn that meditation. Another thing too is, you know, this idea of mantras. All mantras connect to the divine, but they come in from different angles, and they thereby, as they unfold, they have different influences. And so, the idea that, oh, something's a mantra so great I can use it to meditate. No. That's like walking into a pharmacy and saying, well, it's all medicine, so I'm just going to take one of everything off the shelf, or, oh, this one's pretty blue pill, so I'll take it. No, there's a technology to mantras, right-handed tantra, the proper use of mantras, you see, and it's a subtle knowledge, and it's one that's pretty much ignored, you know. Householders. Yeah, go ahead.
You think people should stay away from mantras, or if they're going to get with mantras, how would they know what, you know what I mean? Like which ones
well, it's a good question. There's some mantras that are universal mantras. Pretty much anybody can use them. That's the mantra that we teach. There are other mantras that are more specific, and the best way to go about that is, I would just learn the mantra that we teach, because then you're safe. It's good. But other mantras for other purposes, then you need to go to a highly, fully trained Vedic pundit. And they do exist. And certainly our Panditji, he's great at Jyotish. And Jyotish is one technology that's used to kind of zero in, and there are other components to it, but on a mantra that would be appropriate for a particular individual. Or he may just say, well, this is a universal mantra. But it also has to do with the nature of your physiology. And this is a whole other arena that gets confused, and that's the whole notion of the caste system, Scotty. The caste system has just really degenerated in a lot of areas into some kind of judgment system. Oh, there's this caste and they're higher than these people over there of another caste. And that is not what the caste system is about. In its pure state, the caste system is just recognizing there are different types of nervous systems. And what is good for one nervous system may not be good for the other. And so then there's a whole technology there of what mantras are appropriate for particular types of nervous systems.
Is it okay to say that the problem with the caste system is let's, for lack of a better word, unenlightened people putting a priority on one nervous system over another, basically?
Yeah, it becomes like a judgment system.
Right.
Yeah. And that's
versus the enlightened people know, okay, all these are the beauty of, you know, creation, right? Where an enlightened person looks at it like that and knows that each one of these is unique into itself and divine. And
yeah, like for example, Lord Krishna was a Kshatriya. You know, Kshatriyas are like they're kings, government rulers, warriors, you know. So it's not like, oh, well, you're more spiritually evolved because you're this other
like
caste.
A Brahmin, or yeah,
like a Brahmin. And there's a need for all those different castes. It's just normal. You know. And isn't it great, really, if you knew? And now in America in particular, people are largely hodgepodges of a bunch of different things, you know. But imagine if you were born into a home where everything was dharmic. You lived in accord with the nature of your nervous system. Your family members all had that same nature. And so even the profession is supported by the home life, you see. It's not that way anymore, you know. It's certainly not in America.
Well, it's what's funny too is when you were talking about Jodish and I remember Chakrapani talking about how you're born when the planets harmonize with your karma, right?
Yeah,
So
you can say it that way. Yeah.
right. So he would say that, you're born exactly at the right time to kind of pick up on your
Yeah.
where you needed to go, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
he's right.
Yeah.
Your Jyotish chart, your astrology chart is largely just a map of your karma, and that's what that's one aspect of God's will is karma. The other aspect of God's will is free will. And it's the interplay of those two things. So we use our free will to navigate the waters of the karma that we were born into, you know. But the problem people get into there is they think, well, I feel free, therefore I am. Well, a lot of what you feel is your karma, So even it comes right back down to guess what? Discernment. Is this my free will, or do I want to do such and such because it's just the karma of my own psychology? You see, it's it's a delicate path. It's a subtle path. They talk about anything more on that, Scotty?
Well, no, it's just it seems like, everything's getting more and more muddied from, like where you might have had the caste system, but when the earth was or when humanity was new, there might have been more channels like that were specific to that, but now that there's so many people and so many people are, now it's just you're born into what you're born in, and it's just, I don't know. I
Well,
just
it's a karmic
Yeah,
mumbo jumbo, right? Right
right.
now, and
Yeah.
and you see, everything cycles. The electron cycles. It has a frequency. The sun rises, it sets. The moon goes through a monthly cycle. The annual cycle. And then there are bigger cycles, yugas. Thousands and thousands of years, and each of these yugas has different laws of nature, very different laws of nature, to the point where if we learn about another yuga, it's like, oh, that's got to be fairy tale because that's not possible. Well, it's just because the laws of nature change, you see, from yuga to yuga. And right now in this yuga, they say the Rakshasas, like in Sat Yuga, the Rakshasas are far off on another planet or whatever. In the Kali Yuga, which is where we are now, the Rakshasas dwell inside of the people. Rakshasas meaning like kind of negativity, you could say. Yeah. So that's what we're dealing with, and that's why we're really lucky. I mean, this phase transition is tough, but it's a transition from Kali Yuga to a brief period of Sat Yuga, and there's a lot of validation for that. It's not just me saying it. It was even predicted thousands of years ago that this time period there was going to be uh, that event taking place. Um, other things that you can do to help evolve: try to do what is right. And it's not easy. We make mistakes and things, but always lean in the direction of doing what's right. And if you even think something maybe isn't right, then maybe if you can, just don't do it. There are the Shastras. The Shastras are guidelines, but we need to be careful. See, here's the thing: the Veda, the knowledge of contained in the knowledge of Veda, and this is an important point, is the laws of nature for each yuga, and so there are techniques, in fact, that are described in Vedic literature, and people might try to practice those techniques, and they say, "Well, it's in the Veda," but the thing is, it can be for a different yuga. Right technique, wrong yuga. So even that has to be really considered. There's some, the example I like to use is the people that walk around with their hands held over their head until their arms turn into leather. They're like two by fours. They can't even use them, thinking that that's going to give them some spiritual progress. Well, maybe in a different yuga, but certainly not evolutionary right now. It's just not.
Michael, how helpful is it to, like, take a look at your likes, your dislikes, your identities, the way that you see the world. Write these things down just to see what your tendencies are and your, you know, just the way you are as a person, so that you
It's
can.
not, it's, I think it's important.
Yeah.
And I also think it's not a very easy path, because you see, whatever color glasses we're wearing, that's what we project onto the world.
Right.
And I think everybody thinks, well, if everybody thought the way I thought, then the world would be fine. And that's not the way it is. And so our likes, our dislikes, how we judge other people, all that is very much based on our own personal identities. So
Right.
if we're capable of taking a look at it and working with it, it's great. But a lot of people aren't. In fact, if they go to somebody who can help them with that, a counselor, a guru, whatever, if they hear something they don't like, instead of being able to work with it constructively, they just get mad at the guru, or get mad at the counselor or whatever. So again, I mean, there has to be a cultivation of real discernment, because at the same time, see, it's all sticky wickets, isn't it? Just because somebody tells you something, you don't take it hook, line, and sinker. The best thing about that is somebody asked a guru about that. He said, "Oh, you're so great, and all your teachings are so magnificent and stuff. But what if you told me to go jump in a lake? Should I do it?" And he said, "No." He says, "You know me by my teachings." And so what we try to do, and in the school we do this, the teachings, and that's a knowledge, and if the more you work with it, the more you look at it, the more it's like, this makes sense. This is common sense. And once you have teachings that are really beautiful and really profound, and not more weird, but just more natural, you see, then you have some sort of assistance. But now you might say, well, the Shastras, we talked about the Shastras in the previous podcast, how those are kind of like guidelines from the Veda, how to live your life. And that's fabulous. And we can implement those Shastras and use those Shastras, but then we need to be careful about that too, because is this Shastra for this yuga, or is it a Shastra for another yuga? Is it understood? Because keep in mind, Vedic literature isn't, look up on page 35, how to behave. It's a subtle knowledge. It's a language of nature, and it's easily misunderstood, and it can be picked up on numerous different levels. And echoes of truth, perceived as truth, hold truth at bay. And this may sound kind of, can't you just give me a cookbook? Can't you just tell me how to be? And there are plenty of self-help books out there that do that, but it's not how it works. It's a more subtle thing. One thing that's helpful is just to be around, if you have the opportunity to be around an enlightened person. The thing is, how do you know they're enlightened and they're not just, more weird, So how do you even know that? But here's the thing. An enlightened person doesn't behave a particular way. They all have their own personalities, and there's a huge range. Some of them are stoic, and others of them are kind and soft and loving. Some of them are very intellectual. Others of them are very touchy-feely. There's a full range of possibilities. But the thing is, they are all rooted in Mother Nature. And so it's their own nature blossoming. It's like a tree, and all the different branches of the tree. All the trees, the trunk is rooted in Mother Earth, but the branches blow in the wind and they all bend in different directions. And so you can't generalize. You can't say, oh, well, this guy's enlightened and his branch is bending over that way, therefore, if I bend my branch over that way, I'll be enlightened too. It's not how it works. That's all upside down, you see. But nevertheless, here's the thing about enlightened people, that depth of their being that they're living in accord with. The docking station is locked into the mother station, and that value then radiates out through them, but it's not going to necessarily be consistent with the observer's preconceived notion of what an enlightened person can be like, but nevertheless, they can feel it. And that's great, because then, but at the same time, what happens is, it's like being too close to the sun. You got to be able to handle it. You get a nice tan, but if you're too close and you can't handle it, you can get burnt. And so even that is a delicate thing. Does that make sense, Scotty? Did I say that okay?
Yeah.
What an enlightened person behaves like. One thing to know, it's the full range of human emotions. It's not like they're peaceful and serene all the time. Some might be more than others, but some might be, there's such a thing as a crotchety saint. I knew one, and it was amazing to be around him. But nevertheless, the guy had some Shakti to him. You could feel it. There was a power there. But even that can be misleading. I can't tell you how many people have come to me through the years and, oh, I just met this guy and he's just so wonderful. And it's amazing that he hasn't studied any of this stuff before, but he's just living it. And then it happens frequently. I must say that 3, 4, 5 months down the line, they'll say, oh, remember that guy I told you about? Boy, was I wrong. So see, when you love someone, you see the divinity in them. Because divinity dwells within everybody, and that's what love is. You see that place inside of them that is divine. But then you also can start to see the turbulence of the personality, and if that's not consistent with your personality, then you're going to reject them. And the thing is, an enlightened person is not going to live their life conforming to your preconceived notions of what an enlightened person is supposed to be like. And so if you're around an enlightened person, you can even say, well, that guy's not enlightened because look how he's behaving. That's not what an enlightened person would be like. I know that. And so once again, double binds everywhere. It's a paradoxical universe. It's a subtle thing. But see, being around an enlightened person, higher energy, which they have, just naturally flows downhill. And so there's a benefit there because you start to they become like a conduit as a connection to the divine. But if you're, again, white knuckling onto a preconceived notion, or if it's more than your physiology can even handle, then it can be even hard to just even be around them, That all makes sense, huh, Scotty?
Sure.
Yeah. Everybody's looking for drama, in this day and age. What did Dr. Lovelace say in that? What was that? The Wild West, Wild West TV series. Everybody knows that the best toys are the one that go bang, and people kind of look for that in spirituality oftentimes, Anything else? I think that pretty much covers it. I've jotted down a few things here, but I think I covered them.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. Well, there's the idea of purity too. One thing that I've experienced living in these mountains is I noticed there's a certain group, and it seems a rather large group of like Southern Baptists that they live a very pure life. And what it starts to do is there's a certain, lack of a better word, a sweetness about their demeanor and being around them. And purity like that is a very good thing. It's very simple. It's clean. And it just feels very, very healthy. It's not mood making. It's not, a Band-Aid therapy overlay. It's just a naturalness. And purity facilitates evolution, you see. But we also have to accommodate for the full range of personalities. And you see people use that as justification. I've talked about, you talked about this one, Scotty, about how I've talked about how it's natural. And then weren't you talking about some people say, well, that's just my nature?
Yeah.
Say something more about that?
Well, I don't know.
Sometimes people will talk that way. I think you were saying that, yeah, they do things that are very unhealthy. There you go.
Oh.
Does that work? They do things that are very unhealthy. And if you say, that may not be so healthy to do that, they will say, well, it's just my own nature.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the idea is that your nature isn't something that just you're living on the surface necessarily. When we talk about your nature, we're talking about your divine nature, your true nature, not what seems natural to you because of your karma.
Right.
Yeah. I think that conveys it, huh, Scotty? Yeah.
Sure.
All right. I think. Yeah. Go ahead.
No. It's just that's where I think there's ways we need to look at things based on the fact that, like, realizing that, okay, it's almost like we're programmed from our karma, so we have to be aware of that, going into this, so that we look at it from, okay, this is my view, this is my programming, or whatever it is, that however you should put that, and maybe you can expand on that. But if you look at it from that point, this is my propunchum that I'm seeing the world through, and I have to keep exploring, and have not be white knuckled to it, but have a relationship where I can keep exploring.
Yeah, that's well said. And that then enters the whole arena of self-honesty, which is not so easy.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Scotty. They say that enlightened people in this time, in these days, they're kicked around like a football. Now, why is that? It's because people have preconceived notions of how people are supposed to behave. And an enlightened person isn't going to conform to that. And so what do? They attack them. They kick them around like a football. So I thought it was actually a saint in India that I heard say that. He said, enlightened people in this time are kicked around like footballs. That's something else to keep in mind. That's why, they say a lot of these saints, they're living in caves, or they're just not available. Because let's face it, there's a tradition of crucifying our saints, and so they just soon live in caves, or just not be accessible to the world, which is a shame, But there was one saint that wanted, because at some point you just feel compelled. You have this knowledge, you just want to share it, So you feel compelled to go out in the world. And the one saint was going to do that, and his friend that was another saint said, "Why do you want to go out there in all of that mud?" Although it sounds kind of harsh, but I think it's good to just get an idea of the sort of the big picture of what's going on in the world today and how it's working from a really profound perspective, I think. Okay. All right. I think that says it. I hope this was received in the spirit it was intended, because a lot of times this can sound pretty exasperating in that, but really it's not, because it clears the way. It gives us an idea of what lies before us if we really want to grow spiritually. All right. So Scotty, if there's nothing else, that's it for now. And we'll talk again with y'all next week. Thanks for listening.